There is an invisible, yet incredibly enduring law governing all things in existence: the journey of return. As the evening deepens, birds, weary after a long day of soaring through the vast and lofty skies, naturally find their way back to the safety of their nests, hidden behind the canopy of leaves. Mighty rivers, having flowed tirelessly through treacherous rapids, lush valleys, and bustling towns, eventually merge into the heart of the vast ocean, where they find absolute stillness. We, as human beings, are no different. After hours of weary rushing through the clamor of the world outside, after all the worries, calculations, and distant ambitions, our souls always yearn for a quiet space to return to ourselves, to return to our most primal state of peace, a sanctuary free from pressure, free from judgment, filled only with the gentle beat of our hearts and the soft cadence of our breath in the quiet dark of the night. The quest to discover the outer world can be long and turbulent, but the journey back to the peace within our own souls is the ultimate destination of a human life. Today, we are here to embark on that very journey together. It is a path that requires no effort, no hurried steps, but simply a readiness to let go, allowing ourselves to rediscover who we are beneath the vast nocturnal sky. Before we begin to listen to the story of the lonely horseman and the endless steppe, I hope you will dedicate these few brief moments to truly love and care for your body. Let the space around you become darker, softer. If you are lying on your comfortable bed, adjust your posture so that every single muscle is perfectly supported. You may lie on your back with your arms resting naturally by your sides, or on your side, if that is the position that brings you the greatest sense of safety and comfort. Feel the softness of the pillow beneath your head, the warmth of the blanket enveloping your body like a gentle embrace, shielding you from all the storms of the world outside. Now, let us gently harmonize our breath. You do not need to force a deep breath or compel yourself into any particular rhythm. Let your breathing happen as naturally as possible. As you breathe in, feel a stream of cool, pure air slowly passing through your nose, filling your chest and spreading a refreshing vitality to every single cell in your body. And as you breathe out, imagine that you are releasing all the fatigue, the cluttered thoughts, and the fragments of today into the open air. Breathe in, and peace fills your mind. Breathe out, and all worries dissolve into nothingness. Once more, breathe in very gently, becoming aware of life existing within each breath. Breathe out very slowly, very deeply, letting your entire body sink further, growing heavier against the warm mattress beneath your back. Direct your attention to your forehead. Let your forehead smooth out, becoming as still as the surface of a lake, without a single ripple. Your eyebrows, which may have been knit tightly all day from the weight of your cares, can now completely relax. The muscles around your eyes, your lips, and even your jaw, let them rest, loosening in the most natural way. The heavy comfort of relaxation begins to flow down into your neck, into your shoulders. Your shoulders are dropping, completely casting away the burden of unfinished tasks. This soothing energy continues to flow down your arms, past your elbows, to the very tips of your fingers. Do you feel a slight, warm, and profoundly comforting tingle enveloping your hands? It is a sign that your body is entering a state of true rest. Continue to let this relaxation spread to your chest, down to your abdomen, and then stream along your spine. Each vertebra feels as though it is gently releasing its tension, freeing you completely. The relaxation pours down into your hips, your thighs, your knees, your calves, and finally into the soles of your feet and your toes. Your entire body at this moment is like a strip of soft silk, devoid of any resistance, completely immersed in the gentle cradle of your familiar bed. You are in a space of absolute safety. In this place, there is only you, the gentle darkness, and the soothing sounds guiding you into a world of tranquility. If, during these moments, certain thoughts happen to flash across your mind about work, about tomorrow, or about anything else, you do not need to fight them or feel frustrated. Simply let those thoughts appear like clouds drifting across the sky, and then gently let them float away with the wind. You do not need to solve anything at this hour. Today has drawn to a close, and you have done your part beautifully. Now is the time to grant yourself the greatest reward: a peaceful sleep, a complete restoration for both your body and your soul. To help maintain and share this peaceful space with many other weary souls, if you find comfort in these soothing sounds, please take a brief moment to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, or write a few warm words in the comments when you wake up tomorrow morning. Your companionship and interaction are the great motivations that inspire me to keep creating these quiet interludes and deep slumbers for everyone. For now, continue to hold on to this tranquility. Continue to relax your body and let your mind gently drift with the guiding words. Preparing to enter a vast expanse where endless fields of green grass stretch to the horizon, and the night sky is filled with the shimmering stars of the steppe. Now that your body is completely relaxed and sinking deep into the plush embrace of your bed, let your mind begin a wondrous journey through space. Imagine yourself leaving behind the narrow walls of your room, leaving behind the clamor of the city, to open your eyes to a vast, boundlessly free expanse. You are standing in the middle of the grand Orkhon steppe of ancient Mongolia. Here, the earth and the sky seem to possess no boundaries. They blend into one another at a distant horizon where your eyes can gaze onward and onward into infinity without meeting a single obstacle. The usual suffocating weight of daily life vanishes entirely, replaced by a sense of absolute freedom that stirs within your soul, as if your heart has just been gifted a vast universe to breathe, to live, and to feel. It is now the hour of twilight, the gentlest moment of evening dusk. Across the entire steppe, the sun's rays are no longer harsh. They have softened into a smooth, honey-gold hue, draping over the rolling hills that cascade one after another, like endless waves of green. A summer breeze, carrying the pure breath of the earth, the wild grass, and the evening dew, begins to sweep across the meadow. The wind brushes against your skin, bringing a cool, remarkably pleasant sensation. As the wind passes, the entire sea of grass sways and ripples, creating whispering, rustling murmurs, like an ancient lullaby from Mother Earth to her children. You can smell the faint aroma of dry grass, mingling with the clean scent of wild flowers. A rustic, intimate fragrance that has the power to heal and soothe every ache within the soul. In the distance, nestled amidst the boundless green of the steppe, the round, simple, whitewashed forms of yurt tents appear, standing as symbols of the peaceful life of the people here. A thin, delicate wisp of evening smoke rises gently from the crown of an old yurt, then slowly dissolves into the stillness of the air. That image brings an immense sense of warmth and security. You know that no matter how vast and cold the outer world may be, in this little corner of the steppe, there is always a hearth fire burning, always a shelter ready to protect you and welcome you back. The surrounding space begins to shift in slow measures as darkness gently falls. The golden hues of twilight recede, giving way to the mystical deep blue of the night. The Mongolian sky now reveals itself in its full, magnificent glory. It is not a dense, heavy blackness, but a tapestry of deep velvet blue, crystal clear, and spreading out like a fathomless ocean without end. From the edge of the horizon, the first stars begin to light up, twinkling like sapphires, exquisitely set upon a velvet backdrop. Then thousands, tens of thousands, and millions of other stars emerge simultaneously, forming a brilliant, vivid Milky Way, so sharp that you feel as though you could simply reach up your hand, spread your fingers, and touch those shimmering particles of light. The darkness upon the steppe carries no fear or loneliness, for it is warmed by the light of a million stars and the presence of a solitary yet vital yurt nearby. You take incredibly light steps upon the soft carpet of grass, moving toward the tent. The ground beneath your feet feels like a plush velvet rug, gently cradling each step. The closer you get to the yurt, the more clearly you feel the crisp chill of the steppe night, a cold just sharp enough to make you long for warmth and peace. From the small opening of the yurt door, a stream of warm golden-orange light spills out, illuminating a dark corner of the meadow. Accompanying this comforting light is the rich aroma of steaming, salted milk tea, sute tsai, the very flavor of hospitality, of family, and of ancient tales about to be told. You stand there, poised between the infinite starry sky, with its evening winds whispering through the dry grass, and the cozy, still sanctuary of the little tent. Every boundary between you and nature seems to dissolve. You realize you are but a small part of this vast universe, yet a part that is completely loved and sheltered. Your mind is now entirely attuned to the rhythm of the steppe, ready to sink deep into the world of the story, where the journey of the lonely horseman is about to begin, guiding you through the ebbs and flows of life, to ultimately find the peaceful harbor for your soul. Continue to hold on to this tranquility. Let these peaceful images wrap around you and slowly step into the main story. On the vast Orkhon steppe of Mongolia, where summer breezes swept through the meadows like the whispers of heaven and earth, a young man named Erdene lived with his grandfather in an old yurt tent. Year-round, the space here held only the green of the grass, the blue of the sky, and the thundering sound of hoofbeats echoing from the distant hills. The lives of the grandfather and grandson passed in tranquility, detached from the frantic rush of the modern world outside. Every morning, as the sun just peeked over the horizon, dispelling the thin mist lingering over the blades of grass, Erdene would awaken very early. He would don his traditional deep blue deal, tie his vibrant red silk sash, and begin his familiar day's work. He would leap onto his horse, nudge its flanks, and ride out into the plains to herd the sheep. The scenery of the steppe in the early morning was as beautiful as an ink-wash painting. In the distance, herds of wild horses galloped across the steppe, leaving thin trails of golden dust in the wind, creating a sense of wild freedom found nowhere else. When night fell, the Mongolian sky stretched out like an ocean filled with stars, mysterious and absolutely still. The Milky Way appeared so clearly that Erdene always felt as if he could simply reach out his hand to touch the shimmering points of light. Whenever darkness descended and the chill of the steppe began to envelop the land, the inside of the old yurt became incredibly warm. His grandfather, old Batu, was a renowned Morin Khuur craftsman and musician in the region. He had spent his entire life dedicated to this instrument, pouring all his joys, sorrows, and life's trials into each string made of horsehair. Every night, he would sit by the hearth fire in the middle of the tent, playing the horsehead fiddle with his wrinkled, calloused hands, yet hands filled with profound emotion. The deep, warm melodies rose and fell, at times rushing like galloping war horses, at times weeping and mourning like the wind sweeping across the boundless steppe during cold winter nights. Erdene loved that music deeply. Ever since he was a child, his grandfather's melodies had nurtured his soul, lulling him into peaceful slumbers. But as he grew older, as his legs learned to stand firm, and his eyes began to look beyond the hills ahead, Erdene began to feel suffocated. He did not want to live his grandfather's life, a life confined to sheep herds, the hearth fire, and old melodies passed down from generation to generation. He craved something newer, more glamorous, in the wide world outside. He had heard merchants tell stories of grand cities with bright electric lights shining through the night, of towering skyscrapers and of a wealthy, prosperous life. Those tales were like tiny sparks, consuming the peace within the young man's heart. "Grandfather," Erdene said one evening, while watching the flickering flames in the center of the tent, his eyes reflecting the fiery red light of ambition. "I want to go to the city of Ulaanbaatar. I want to become rich." Old Batu stopped playing. The space inside the yurt suddenly fell silent for a long time, save for the crackling of dry firewood and the wind sighing gently against the roof. He looked at his only grandson with a contemplative, worried gaze. Then he slowly poured a hot bowl of salted milk tea, sute sai, from the copper kettle on the hearth, and handed it to the young man, letting the warmth calm his restless spirit. "What do you think wealth is?" the grandfather asked, his voice deep and slow. Erdene accepted the bowl of tea and answered without hesitation. "It means having money, having a big house, not having to live in this freezing wind. I don't want to face blizzards, loneliness, and the poverty of the steppe my whole life." Batu looked at his grandson and smiled sadly. It was the smile of someone who had walked through most of a lifetime, witnessing the endless changes of the world. He spoke softly. "A person can own an entire city and still be lonelier than a man sitting in the middle of the steppe." Erdene did not reply. He bowed his head and took a sip of the salted milk tea, but his heart was filled with resistance. To the young man, then, his grandfather's wisdom was merely the thoughts of an old conservative man who had never stepped out of this grassland world, and thus could not comprehend the allure of modernity, wealth, and fame. He chose to remain silent, but the intention to leave had completely taken root in his mind. A few weeks later, the Naadam festival, the largest and most anticipated event of the year for the Mongolian people, officially began. The entire Orkhon steppe suddenly became vibrant with colors, completely shedding its usual quietude. Men, women, and children dressed in magnificent silk deals, embroidered with gold thread, wearing high hats adorned with jade, came riding on fierce war horses from all directions toward the festival grounds. Laughter, cheers, and songs echoed across the boundless grass. Breathtaking horse races, intense wrestling matches, and skillful archery contests lasted from early morning until the sun went down. Erdene was the best young rider in the region. He possessed a loyal steed that ran as fast as an arrow piercing the wind. For Erdene, this year's competition was not merely a glorious tournament to prove himself. It was the single ticket to fulfill his dream. If he won the race this year, he would receive a substantial cash prize from the organizers, enough to buy a train ticket and leave the steppe to start a new life in the city. Before the final race began, as Erdene was checking the harness of his horse, old Batu walked over. His face bore the deep lines of time, his eyes filled with reluctance. He slowly handed his grandson a sky-blue silk scarf, old but cleanly washed and neatly folded. "This was your father's scarf," old Batu said. his voice trembling slightly. Erdene froze, his hands tightening on the saddle strap, suddenly turning rigid. His memory of his father was very faint. His father had perished in a terrible sandstorm in the Gobi Desert when he was a very small child, before he could even clearly remember the face of the man who gave him life. He looked at the silk scarf, then at his grandfather, and asked in a somewhat cold tone, "Why did you keep it?" Old Batu sighed, placed the scarf into Erdene's hands, and said, "To remind me that some people wander too far and then forget the way back." Hearing this, Erdene frowned, feeling that his grandfather was trying to use family affection and the sorrowful past of his father to anchor his footsteps and extinguish his ambition. He gripped the silk scarf tightly, looked straight into his grandfather's eyes, and asserted with absolute confidence and pride, "I will not be like father." Batu said nothing more. He only looked at his grandson in silence, his gaze holding a profound sorrow that Erdene, at that moment, could not possibly understand. The young man turned away, leapt onto his horse, and moved toward the starting line. The race commenced under the roaring cheers of thousands of spectators lining the tracks. The horn sounded, reverberating through the air. Dozens of powerful horses lunged forward simultaneously like a whirlwind, kicking up dust that obscured the sky. Erdene crouched low over his horse's back, his black hair flying in the cold wind, his eyes fixed solely on the finish line. He synchronized perfectly with his steed, overtaking one rival after another in a spectacular display. The thunderous, rhythmic pounding of hooves on the hard earth vibrated like thunder, electrifying every cell in the young man's body. He was leading. Victory and a wealthy life in the city were just within reach. However, life rarely indulges human ambition so easily. When the race had only a short distance left, just as Erdene was preparing to urge his horse across the glorious line, a sudden, fierce wind blew in from nowhere. The gust brought a piercingly cold chill and strange whistling sounds. Erdene's horse panicked at the abrupt change in the weather. It let out a terrified neigh and reared up on its hind legs. Erdene lost control completely. He did not have time to grab the horse's mane. His terrified scream rang out, swallowed by the howling wind of the steppe. In the next instant, Erdene was thrown violently from the horse's back, his body airborne for a brief second, before crashing hard onto the rocky slope of a hill, rolling several times before coming to a stop. Excruciating pain washed over him, causing him to black out. When Erdene regained consciousness, night had already fallen. The Naadam festival had ended, and the space had returned to its desolate, wild silence. The sharp ache from his broken leg made it impossible for him to stand. Every tiny movement felt as if 1,000 needles were piercing his flesh. He looked into the distance. The warm lights of the festival were now just tiny, faint specks, dim like embers at the very edge of the horizon. The night wind of the steppe whistled past his ears with a freezing bite as if mocking his failure. For the first time in his life, the strong young man Erdene felt terror. He realized he was completely alone, helpless against the vast and ruthless elements. Refusing to surrender to death, Erdene gritted his teeth against the pain, using his hands to crawl step by step through the thick darkness upon the grass. He crawled aimlessly, hoping to find help. After what felt like an eternity, when his strength was nearly depleted, he spotted a flickering light ahead. It was a solitary yurt tent, standing alone amidst the boundless meadows. Hearing a strange noise outside, a young woman drew back the door curtain and stepped out. She wore a simple cream-white deal, and her long black hair was elegantly braided with pale blue ribbons. Under the full moon, her face was as gentle as the moonlight itself. Seeing Erdene lying frail upon the ground, the girl rushed over. She knelt down, her voice as soft as the night breeze. "Are you hurt?" Erdene murmured, his lips trembling from the cold and pain. "I fell from my horse." Without hesitation, the girl supported his arm, using all her strength to guide him into the tent. Inside this yurt, it was remarkably warm, a warmth completely antithetical to the cold, cruel night outside. The hearth fire crackled in the center, casting a comforting golden-orange glow. The rich scent of hot milk tea drifted through the air, bringing a sense of absolute safety. The girl laid Erdene down on a plush sheepskin mattress, then turned to the hearth to fetch a hot bowl of steaming sautéed sai, handing it to him. "Here," she said with a gentle smile. Erdene accepted the bowl, with hands trembling from the cold and emotion. He took a small sip. Wherever the warm, savory milk tea flowed, his body felt revitalized. He looked at the girl and expressed his gratitude. "Thank you. I am Erdene." The girl smiled and replied, "I am Sarangerel." Sarangerel's father was a practitioner of hume, the traditional throat-singing art of the Mongolian people. That night, while the steppe wind continued to howl, battering the tent walls outside, the old man sat by the hearth, closed his eyes, and began to sing. The throat-singing sound was deep, resonant, vibrating from the very depths of the earth, mingling with the crackling fire. Erdene had never heard such a magical sound. It was not an ordinary song. It was like the echo of mountains, rivers, and the very soul of the steppe. The sound acted like a cool stream flowing through Erdene's wounded, ambition-ridden soul, soothing his heart in a wondrous way. He no longer felt the pain. He no longer felt the bitterness of the afternoon's fall. Sarangerel sat beside him, watching Erdene intently, and suddenly asked a question that startled him. "Are you running away from something?" Erdene fell silent. He stared down at the emptied bowl of tea in his hands, his mind tangled with thoughts. Then he let out a faint, self-deprecating laugh. "I want to leave this place," Sarangerel softly inquired. "Why?" Erdene looked up at the crown of the tent, through which the night stars could be seen, and bared his soul. "Because this place is too vast and too lonely. I hate the terrifying silence of these plains." Sarangerel did not seem surprised by his answer. She turned her head to gaze at the pitch-black night outside the door and spoke gently, offering a profound truth. I think it is precisely because it is vast that the human heart has room to breathe. Those words felt like an electric current running down Erdene's spine. They immediately brought back the memory of his beloved grandfather, recalling his words. A person can own an entire city and still be lonelier than a man sitting in the middle of the steppe. He realized that both Sarangerel and his grandfather possessed a wisdom, a peace that he, no matter how fast he tried to run, could never attain. The next morning, with his leg wound carefully bandaged and the pain subsided, Erdene bid farewell to Sarangerel and her father to return home. Yet throughout the journey back, and for months afterward, the image of that warm yurt in the middle of the endless grass, the gentle face of Sarangerel, and the kume singing echoing through the dark night kept replaying in his mind like a haunting melody. Nevertheless, the desire of youth and the allure of the city remained too powerful. A few months later, when his leg had completely healed, Erdene still decided to pursue his original plan. He packed his bags, said goodbye to his grandfather, and left the Orkhon steppe for the city of Ulaanbaatar. The city of Ulaanbaatar welcomed him with a chaotic rush, greater than anything he had ever imagined. Asphalt roads covered in dust, the incessant honking of car horns day and night, gray skyscrapers blocking the sky, and crowded markets filled with buyers and sellers overwhelmed a child of the steppe like Erdene. Initially, he was thrilled by this new life. He felt he had truly stepped into the world. He was fortunate to secure a well-paying job working for a wealthy merchant, managing the transport of goods. He began to have money, could afford modern clothes, dined on expensive meals in restaurants, and lived in a warm room, no longer having to worry about the freezing winds of the steppe. However, as time passed and the initial novelty faded, Erdene gradually realized he had never truly been happy in this cramped space. Life in the city was a sequence of days repeating themselves in a soulless loop. Everyone around him was rushed, hurried, looking at each other with suspicious and calculating eyes. Nights in the city lacked the whispering steppe wind that served as a lullaby. There was no fragrant scent of dry grass mingling with the morning dew. And above all, there was no deep, warm, forgiving music of his grandfather's Morin Khuur. He lived among tens of thousands of people, yet always felt a loneliness that pierced to his very bones, an emptiness that money or excitement could never fill. He realized he was like a tree uprooted from fertile soil, slowly withering away amidst cold concrete walls. One night, after an exhausting day of work, Erdene walked aimlessly through the streets. As he passed a corner of an old, deserted market, his ears suddenly caught a deeply familiar sound. The music of a Morin Khuur rose amidst the freezing city night. The sound was rustic, solitary, yet filled with immense power. He followed the music and discovered a blind old man, dressed in a worn deal, sitting on a tattered tarp by the roadside, his thin hands passionately playing the horsehead fiddle. That sound instantly shattered the barrier in Erdene's heart, drawing him back to his childhood, back to the old Yurt tent and his grandfather. Tears nearly welled up in his eyes. He stood frozen, watching the old man play for a long time. When the piece ended, the blind old man raised his head toward him, and though his eyes could not see, he spoke in a raspy voice. "Young man, you are homesick." Erdene was stunned. He took a step back, asking in astonishment, "How do you know?" The blind old man gently laid the instrument across his lap and smiled wisely. "The person who longs for home always has the saddest eyes. The sound of your footsteps and your breath told me so." That night, after returning to his rented room, Erdene could not sleep at all. He lay with his arm over his forehead, staring at the gray ceiling. For the first time in his life, after years of wandering in a foreign place, he bitterly realized that what he had been seeking all along was not money, tall buildings, or opulence. It was the feeling of belonging somewhere, the peace in the soul that he had inadvertently lost when he abandoned the steppe. He missed his grandfather, missed Sarangerel, missed the scent of salted milk tea. He knew what he had to do. A month later, after concluding all his affairs and packing his luggage, Erdene decided to give up city life to return to the Orkhon steppe. He purchased a horse and set out. By the time he arrived, the summer of the steppe was nearly spent. The wind blew harder, carrying the biting chill of approaching autumn. The once lush green meadow had turned a pale yellow. Desolate, yet retaining its boundless, majestic grandeur. His grandfather's old yurt still stood solitary amidst the plains, its roof faded further by the elements. Erdene hurried his horse forward, pushing open the tent door. The scene inside remained the same, but the warmth of the hearth was gone. On the small bed in the corner, old Batu lay with frail breaths, his face gaunt and pale. He had grown very old, and time had taken all the strength of the once talented craftsman. Erdene rushed to the bedside, grasping his grandfather's thin, cold hand, his voice choking in his throat. "Grandfather!" Old Batu heard the familiar call and opened his eyes slowly, his clouded vision trying to discern the face before him. Upon realizing it was the grandson he yearned for day and night, he smiled gently, contentedly. He murmured, his voice as weak as a candle before the wind, "You finally found your way back." Erdene could no longer contain his emotions. He fell to his knees beside the bed, pressing his face against his grandfather's hand, weeping bitterly like a child. Tears of belated regret rolled down his cheeks. "I am sorry. I was wrong, grandfather." Old Batu placed his remaining thin hand on his grandson's shoulder, caressing him tenderly. He offered no words of reproach, only saying softly, "No one understands the value of home until they have gone far away." In the days that followed, Erdene cast aside all other thoughts, devoting himself entirely to caring for his grandfather. He rekindled the hearth fire, brewed bowls of hot milk tea for him, and massaged his grandfather's thin hands. Every evening, when old Batu's health permitted, he would try to sit up, take his familiar Morin Khuur, and play by the hearth fire. The music was no longer old or tedious to Erdene. He listened with his entire soul. He realized this music was the very heartbeat of the steppe, the soul of the ancestors, a sacred sound capable of binding human beings to their homeland. One evening, after concluding a long melody, old Batu slowly handed the Morin Khuur to Erdene. He looked at him with an expectant gaze and said, "Try to play." Erdene was flustered. He supported the instrument but shook his head. "I do not know how. I have never learned seriously." Old Batu smiled, patted his grandson's shoulder, and advised, "Just let your heart play the fiddle. Music does not reside in dexterous fingers. It resides in the soul." Trembling, Erdene took the Morin Khuur, rested the soundbox on his knee, and held the bow in his right hand. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath to feel the space around him, and drew the first stroke. The first sound emerged clumsy, rough, and broken, completely lacking melody. Yet old Batu, sitting beside him, still smiled with immense happiness. He nodded and said, "That is the sound of someone who has learned to remember." That winter, as the first snowflakes began to fall, draping a blanket of pure white over the grand Orkhon steppe, old Batu passed away in a deeply peaceful sleep. He departed with a serene smile, knowing he had fulfilled his mission as a grandfather, a keeper of the steppe's flame. That night, after completing the funeral arrangements according to the traditional customs of the nomads, Erdene sat alone before the yurt door. The winter night sky, filled with stars, stretched out infinitely, cold and solemn. The steppe wind blew through the dry, barren grass, creating endless rustling murmurs like sighs of mourning. Erdene cradled his grandfather's Morin Khuur in his arms. He began to play. He played throughout the night without stopping. The melodies from his instrument were no longer clumsy. They were saturated with emotion, pain, regret, and profound gratitude. The music blended with the howling wind through the darkness, soaring far and high, serving as a final farewell, a solemn promise from the young rider to his departed grandfather. He had truly become a child of the steppe. The following spring, as the snow melted, tender green shoots began to peek through the soil, bringing new life to the Orkhon steppe. Erdene decided to erect a new, sturdy yurt tent right beside his grandfather's old one, signifying the continuity of generations. One day, as he was repairing the sheep fence, a familiar figure came riding leisurely from the distance. It was Sarangerel. She still wore her gentle, cream-white deal, a radiant smile gracing her lips like the spring sunshine. She brought a pot of hot korkog, traditional mutton stewed with hot stones, and freshly steamed booze dumplings, aromatic and piping hot. She stopped her horse before the tent, looked at Erdene, and smiled softly, teasing. "Do you still remember how to drink milk tea?" Seeing her, Erdene's heart flooded with indescribable joy. He walked over to help her down from the horse, laughing heartily. "Perhaps now I remember much more than before." They sat together outside the new tent as the sun began to sink behind the distant mountains of the steppe. In the distance, The wild horses appeared once more, galloping across the meadow like living winds, free and powerful. Night fell slowly, bringing a cool, pleasant breeze. The brilliant Milky Way, once again, manifested across the boundless sky of Mongolia, standing as a witness to love and rebirth. Sarangerel gently rested her head against Erdene's strong shoulder, both looking up at the starry sky. She asked softly, her voice like a whisper of the spring wind, "Do you still want to leave this place?" Erdene turned to look at her beautiful profile, then cast his gaze across the vast steppe, where the fire inside the new tent crackled warmly, where the wind rustled familiarly, and the scent of hot milk tea drifted through the air. For the first time in his life, since he was an ambitious boy, he felt his body and soul were exactly where they belonged. He felt a complete, unrippled peace, devoid of any regret,